So regardless of how this list was constructed, General Grievous was going to be in the top 2. Now, I was going to have him as number 1, but a friend of mine said, no, Argent, you have to have the person who's at number 1 at number 1. And I said it doesn't really matter who's at number 1 and number 2. These people are equally badass, just kind of in different ways. So I'm going to be calling him Grievous throughout this because I can't pronounce his Kalish name. Sheol, I think is Sheol. I can't pronounce it, so I'm just going to call him Grievous. Now, for most people, the fact that your name is General Motherfucking Grievous would be enough to be alpha as fuck. Also, you have the fact that in the movies, at least, by the time he had a droid body, he was able to kill dozens of Jedi and keep their lightsabers as trophies by using 4 arms and wielding 4 lightsabers at the same time, despite the fact that he had no force powers. My understanding of how General Grievous was able to beat other Jedi was his arms could spin like 30 times a second, and despite their force-augmented reflexes, they could just not move fast enough to block him. So those alone would be enough to put him on this list. Having your name as General Grievous and killing dozens of Jedi with 4 lightsabers despite having no force powers. That's just the beginning of how fucking alpha Grievous was. So Grievous was born on Kali to the Kalish people. Now the Kalish people are a race of humanoid lizards. And everybody in their civilization wears masks, probably because they're so ugly. Or I think it's just their culture because they're like a tribal people. So the Kalish were a primitive warrior culture where everybody wore skull masks. I mean, that's pretty badass to begin with. So the Kalish had been in a forever war with the Yam'ri. I think that's how you pronounce it. And the Yam'ri prized the Kalish because they were so strong and durable, and they made excellent slaves. Now, Grievous was the son of a chieftain, and he was such a badass, he had killed 40 Yam'ri by the time he was 10 using a conventional sniper rifle. So he literally used a, like, 20th century or 21st century style, like, bolt-action scope rifle, and he killed 20 enemies armed with, like, personal shields and laser guns. That's just how awesome he was, and he was 10. He had killed 40 people in a universe where everyone uses blasters. By the time he was 22, Grievous had killed so many people, so many of his people's enemies, they began to worship him as a god of war. How badass do you have to be worshipped as a god of war by the time you're 22? So, around this time, Grievous had a prophetic dream that he was destined to meet another Kalish named Ronderu. Now, his dream came true, fulfilling an ancient Kalish prophecy that the Messiah of their people would have a dream, and he would meet the one he dreamed of, and then he would save his people. So, while all Kalish are hideous by human standards, Ronderu was regarded as being remarkably beautiful by their reptilian standards, which combined with her incredible talent made her beloved by the people. So she was basically the ultimate waifu of the Kalish people, and she became Grievous's partner in life. And they became, I don't know if it's directly confirmed, but it's pretty obvious that they were lovers. And she was the love of Grievous's life. And I think they were married. We'll just say that they were married. And they were the 2 greatest warriors the Kalish ever produced. And together they were able to defeat entire armies of opponents watching each other's back. Eventually Ronderu would be killed while a Yam'ri trap separated the 2 of them. When she was killed, Grievous would wind up grieving for the rest of his life. I think that's when he adopted the name. Yes, he adopted the name Grievous because the love of his life died, and he would never experience joy again. An attempt to cover up the hole in his heart, Grievous took 10 wives and had 30 children. If taking 10 wives and having 30 children doesn't make you alpha, I don't know what would. So yeah, he changed his name to Grievous to symbolize his eternal grief. So Grievous, through dueling and defeating all the other chiefs of his alpha warrior people, united all the Kaleesh tribes behind him and kicked the Yam'ri out of his world. Keep in mind, the Kaleesh were using like normal swords and like 20th century style bolt throwers is what they call them in the Star Wars universe. So he was able to kick them off despite their shields, starships, and blaster rifles. As they were driving them off, they stole a number of starships, and the Kaleesh used the starships to invade the Yam'ri worlds, with the intent of destroying the Yam'ri's ability to ever commit genocide against his people and sell them into slavery again. While he was winning, despite the fact that literally it was a bunch of like primitives wearing masks, eventually what happened was the Yam'ri lied to the Senate and the Jedi were sent to intervene. The Jedi kicked the Kaleesh off of all the Yam'ri worlds and drove them back to Kali. Once on Kali, the Jedi imposed immense sanctions against Kaleesh, which led to widespread starvation as the planet was not self-sufficient in the aftermath of being raped by the Yam'ri. This would lead to General Grievous despising the Jedi and seeking revenge against them for the crimes they committed against his people. So what wound up happening is Kali was forced to borrow immense amounts of money in order to buy food and prevent mass starvation. Grievous was, well, grieved by the state of his people. Because Grievous was such a fucking badass, though, the banking clan came to him and said, "Look, Grievous, you're the most alpha person alive in the universe. If you personally will work for us as our enforcer, we will forgive the entire planet's debt and provide support to it." Yes, Grievous was such a badass that the banking clan forgave an entire planet's debt if he would fight for them. So basically, after he made a shit ton of money and his planet recovered, he's like, guys, I gotta go back and rule my people. I got my 10 wives. Maybe I'll get another 20 and have 100 kids. And then all the Kaleesh will be descended from me. And I'll be like the Genghis Khan of my people. So as he was going back, Dooku blew up his ship, which destroyed 90% of his body. Despite 90% of his body being destroyed, General Grievous was so badass he refused to die. Dooku would rebuild him, and he went on to become the supreme commander of the Separatist forces, killing numerous Jedi throughout the war as a revenge for what happened to his people. He later built his own castle and kept a Rogwart named Gore as a pet. A Rogwart is basically a Rancor. So he kept a Rancor as a pet, and he fed his enemies to it. I mean, if having a castle and having a fucking giant monster as your pet isn't badass, I don't know what is. So Grievous would go on to win all of the CIS's victories on his ship called the Invisible Hand. Now, the Invisible Hand is a pretty badass name. So he succeeded in capturing fucking Palpatine, but eventually what happened was he was outmaneuvered by the Sith, and he died fighting Obi-Wan, which, to be fair, Obi-Wan is one of the greatest duelists of all time, so there's no dishonor in losing. Nevertheless, he goes down as being a true alpha male and one of the greatest lightsaber duelists in the history of Star Wars, despite having no force powers whatsoever. General Grievous, you were based as fuck, you were alpha as fuck, and we salute you.